which is all learned. And so these are learned phenomenon. And it's sometimes outside influence. So talk about happiness. As I was writing and I was doing the chapter on mindsets around emotion and talking about this relationship with different emotions. And, we could play around with this all day long. I could say, what's your relationship to anger? What's your relationship to happiness and contentment? And all of a sudden you start realizing, wow, I have a complicated relationship with my emotions. And I was thinking about it with happiness too. And for me, what's interesting, which is different completely from your dad's, is because of my kind of tough childhood and a lot of bullying, is that I would go to school one day and I would be happy. And I'd see the bullies, and all of a sudden they'd say things like, what are you so happy about today, Brackett? And I didn't realize that until I was writing. And then I would get on stage and I do a lot of public speaking, and I'd be standing there like feeling really good with my speaking. And then I'd get the applause at the end, and I would start kind of looking down, and I started realizing I'm uncomfortable being happy. Like I'm waiting for something to go wrong because, in my childhood, like happy meant like, we're going to bring you down. We all have these kind of developmental connections, for lack of a better term, to our different emotions. And I think that it gets back to the phenomenon. There's no good or bad emotions. Life, firstly, some of it is genetic and biological, our proclivity to experience certain emotions. The regulation piece is all learned. Like you're not born with a pocket full of evidence-based strategies to regulate. It's just like, I don't know about you growing up. My father was very different. My father was the angry guy, and he'd say, "Son, you gotta toughen up." I'm like, "Dad, look at me. Come on, let's move on. It's not happening." And you know that I have a 5th-degree black belt. I became the tough guy that my father wanted me to be. But nevertheless, what does that even mean? But, growing up, when I was struggling, my parents missed a lot of the cues. Come down the stairs. I didn't have my father say, "Son, I'm noticing a shift in your emotions today. Your posture is different. Your facial expression is different. Let me give you a research-based strategy to help you regulate your anxiety, stress, pressure, fear." No, it wasn't even a construct. I mean, I don't know, but did you grow up with a concept of emotion regulation?
Definitely.
You did.
And
Awesome.
There was a big gender split. In my home, I had the sort of belief based on the context that women could express their emotions big or small, and that men weren't supposed to lose their temper. Men weren't supposed to be angry.
That's interesting. It's kind of counter the way people think about it nowadays, right? Like,
oh yeah,
the men are like, the more power you have, the more anger you can express.
Oh, the complete opposite of that. In fact, and I don't think he'll mind. My dad's been on this podcast, and we have a great relationship now, and and we've done work, and it's been awesome. I mean, it really has. I mean, and I remember when I was a kid, if he got angry, he would blink. And now I know that as like behavioral suppression.
Yeah.
He was like blinking, but I can't ever remember my dad having an outburst ever. So I just internalized this idea like, okay, you don't have outbursts. But I have a certain side of my family that, my extended family that's from New Jersey.
Oh,
and where words are sometimes used as weapons.
Okay.
And anger is a bit more outward sometimes, at least in that side. And then I have a South American side where things are more, formal and boxed away. And I think I internalized a bit of both. And so I have all sorts of constructs around who's allowed to express emotions and what extremes. But no, I didn't observe a lot of anger.
Or maybe a little suppression.
Lots of suppression.
Which is regulation. It's just
yeah,
not the adaptive kind usually.
Right. And, I probably averaged the two, in my own life. But in terms of happiness, I think the same thing now that I think about it, that it's okay for women to be fully expressive and for men to be, it's a bit more of the, it's kind of the 1950s model was very present in my home and in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I can think with happiness, as with any emotion, it's about the time and the place for happiness. Like we have research that shows that people who strive to be happy all the time actually are more miserable. because it's hard to live up to that all the time. People who strive for more contentment in their life actually seem to have greater well-being. And so I just think, again, it goes back to these mindsets around emotions, that there's no good or bad emotion. Anger is fine. Obviously, if it's too intense and it's lasting too long, it's probably not going to be good. Happiness is something that we should, experience, but, if we're attached to it, it's going to be problematic, because every day is not a sunny day. There are rainy days too, and you got to be comfortable with the rainy days. And the important thing also is not just our feelings about our feelings. It's also about our mindsets around our capacity to deal with those feelings. Like, do I believe I am capable of managing my anger? Do I believe I'm capable of dealing with the disappointment? And we find a distribution of scores for that too. Like, going back to my dad, we have very different fathers. My father would say things like, son, this is the way I deal with my anger. You're going to have to get used to it. I would say now, like, sounds like you got a fixed mindset, Dad. Like, there are other options, to deal with your anger. But he was sort of like, this is the way I am. You're going to have to deal with it. No learning interests. Whereas nowadays, I hope to help people see, wait a minute, is that emotion working for you in your relationships or not? If it's not, there are alternatives.
I mean, we're talking about boys and men quite a bit already here. So maybe we just continue in that direction, even though we will touch on girls and women and emotions as it relates to them too. I hear a lot nowadays about problems for boys and young men in emotion regulation, in defining masculinity. I'm obviously interested in this, but I also acknowledge that I'm Gen X. I was born in 1975. Things were very different.
Yeah.
And I know I have a giant blind spot to their experience, right? I just do. I acknowledge that because I don't really have a finger on the pulse of what life is like for a 15-year-old or 12-year-old or 20-year-old guy out there. What are the pain points and what's going right?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And I think probably the big issue here with gender is vulnerability. That historically, this is not just now, this is going back to when we were kids, when our parents were kids, go back to other periods in time, is that vulnerability, especially for men, is weak. You got to be tough. You're the person who has to make the ends meet. You're the hunter gatherer. And obviously times have changed, and what we find is that the thought today for many boys and men to be emotional. Firstly, emotional alone has a connotation of feminine and out of control. That's just the way people think about it.
Still?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
When you say, don't be so emotional, it's considered to be a negative thing. It's considered to be feminine, and it's considered to be like a hysterical. That's why I call it emotion skills, not emotional skills. Anyway. So vulnerability is a big piece of it. This is going to be a great conversation between two guys. So what's your relationship to vulnerability?
Totally context dependent.
Okay.
I mean, there are people I'm not afraid at all to cry in front of. There are contexts and people that I would never cry. I mean, I've cried on very public podcasts, 2, maybe 3. One here, when Martha Beck came on, she wasn't trying, but it was happening. Yep. And then on Stephen Bartlett's podcast, I think perhaps on another, and it was tough. I mean, I didn't want to watch those clips, but I'm glad I did it. So totally context dependent.
Yeah, and that makes sense. What I'm really pushing for is like around emotion and about talking about feelings. And so what we find is that boys generally feel more inhibited just saying how they feel, especially when it comes to kind of the sad, disappointment, ashamed emotions. It's much easier to express the anger, and the outwardly expressive emotions, but the deep ones that are self-conscious, that make you vulnerable, tends to be tough. And the question is, why is that the case? What are your hypotheses? Why would it be that so many boys feel like they're going to be perceived as feminine if they say they're disappointed or sad or ashamed.
What immediately comes to mind is that somehow it is linked with the word incapable or incapability.
Exactly.
There's an incredible video of David Goggins breaking down crying on stage. And he was celebrated for that. But David Goggins did a lot of things beforehand. And no one denies his capability, his ability. So when he cried, it was like, awesome. He's willing to go to this really hard place. Yet another difficult thing that David can do that most people can't do. And you just go like, awesome. And he's owning it. And I stepped back from that and realized, but we already knew former Navy SEAL, went from 300 plus pounds to this fit individual, you know, Goggins. Yeah. He's a verb, an adjective, and a, you know, and a pronoun, right? So it's like, shit, you know, if someone else just breaks down on stage, you go, okay, like, I hope this guy can make it in life. That's the narrative.
It's like weak.
You worry sometimes for people like that. I don't worry about David Goggins.
Because he's a superstar and we have a different mindset around him again. And so he has the permission to do whatever the hell he wants.
And that permission thing, forgive me, but this notion of earned the right. I mean, there are people like James Cameron who wrote all these movies and was famous for like doing all these super difficult things. And then a few years back was like claiming that testosterone poisoned men and that his testosterone was the worst thing. And everyone that liked his movies said, hey, listen, easy for you to say now. You built that career on some of that. So it wasn't, in my opinion, taken that seriously. He may not like it if he hears this, but like, I'm like, it's like when our colleagues are like, oh, I'm no longer going to publish in Nature and Science. I'm going to go to these like, you know, these open source journals. It's like, you got in the National Academy on Nature and Science papers. So like, you're not kidding anybody.
Well, you're making an important point, which is that once you know, I always find it interesting with celebrities, once they become